Welcome, everyone, to QB Power Hour. Today is June 29th, 2017, and today's episode is Building Commission Reports with QuickBooks Desktop. This will be an all 100% QuickBooks Desktop themed episode. There are no QuickBooks Online topics that will be covered today whatsoever. The agenda for today is we'll talk briefly about QB Power Hour and the host. We'll talk about the CPE process for those accountants and QuickBooks Pro advisors that are logged in to get their continuing education credit. And the topics for today will be basically split into two. First, we'll learn about the different fields, which track sales, cost, and in some cases, custom values that are tracked in QuickBooks in order to calculate a commission at some point. And then we'll talk about some good scenarios in which the data should be imported into Excel and to build those custom reports based on a spreadsheet. So those are the learning objectives for today. QB Power Hour is a webinar series, usually twice a month, every other week, Thursdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Next episode will be in 2 weeks. We don't have a topic yet. It was kind of the same thing. The topic for today wasn't really announced until recently. Right now Michelle's traveling a lot, so I'm by myself. So I'm coming up with these topics in some cases a week before the webinar gets started. The advanced topics are the ones I usually prepare with enough time in advance. We usually cover tips and tricks, and we're split between QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. For the most part, I cover most of the QuickBooks Desktop topics, and Michelle Long covers most of the QuickBooks Online topics. From time to time, we'll have a special guest, third-party app, practice management topics, and things related to the accounting industry. Today, however, will be 100% QuickBooks Desktop topics. Michelle Long is not with us today. She's actually teaching a QuickBooks Online certification class somewhere in the United States. I don't know where she is. She's an international speaker, author of several QuickBooks books, co-host of QB Power Hour, and also the Accounting Beacon. And she has a LinkedIn group with about 165,000 members called Successful QuickBooks Consultants. Check it out. My name is Hector Garcia. I live and work in the Miami area. I teach QuickBooks in my own classroom, member of the Intuit Trainer Writer Network, and part of the Accountant Council in the past year and a half, which has been a great experience giving Intuit some direct feedback on my thoughts about the product and the direction of the company. My email is hector@garciacpa.com. If you have any questions, I'm pretty good at answering emails, or at Twitter at QBK Accounting. Some of the upcoming events worth mentioning is Intuit is still on tour through July. There's still a couple of events left for QuickBooks Online Basic Certification and Advanced Certification. Check it out, qbtrainingevents.com. I think they only got about 3 cities left. So if you want to get Basic Certified or Advanced Certified in QuickBooks Online, check out the website. The biggest QuickBooks event of the year will be in November 15th to the 17th, which is QuickBooks Connect. It's an Intuit sponsored event, or Intuit puts together the event. And it will be in San Jose, California. Michelle and I are likely to be there. So if you do go there, make sure you say hi. And Scaling New Heights, which just happened a couple of weeks ago, will be in Atlanta, Georgia next year in June 17th to the 20th of 2018. Check them out at woodardevents.com. About the CPE process. So if you are an accountant or a certified bookkeeper or some sort of accounting professional that requires continuing education credits, you must attend the webinar live. It's not available for recordings. You must attend it live, must be logged in for at least 50 minutes. We will ask 4 polling questions in which you really only need to answer 3 to get your credit. CPE certificates take about 3 weeks. We are caught up to the episode before last. So the last episode hasn't been sent yet. And some of our episodes are A's. This one in particular is not. If you don't know what ACE is, then don't worry about it. If you do know what ACE is, the answer is this episode is not. Last week's it was. This episode is not. And the next one that we have, we should announce it. Put it on the website or put it on the Facebook group ahead of time. Thank you to our sponsors, TSheets, #1 rated app in apps.com. Create, manage, and approve your timesheets from any device. www.tsheets.com is the only time tracking solution I recommend to my clients. Arrow Workflow It's the only workflow management tool that was created by QuickBooks Pro Advisors for QuickBooks Pro Advisors. So if you're a QuickBooks Pro Advisor and you're having a tough time managing your workflow, check them out, aeroworkflow.com. It does integrate with QuickBooks Online. And HubDoc, it is the most popular document aggregator for any QuickBooks Power users. Powerful document manager, log in with your client's bank's credentials, all your bank statements, deposit images, check images for most banks download automatically into your HubDoc profile. All right, so let's start on the topics now. Let me go ahead and turn off the webcam. So the commission reports, we're gonna kind of split this up into 6 topics. We'll talk about what we call the basic commission reports, which is based on sales. So that's going to be a little bit of the sort of the basic stuff. You just pull the sales by rep and calculate a commission based on that. Then we'll talk about gross profit. That's when we need to calculate a commission based on the profit of a sale, and that will require inventory items because without inventory items, you can't calculate profit. Then we'll talk about based on a job's net profit, and that's if we have maybe a construction or project type of business that doesn't manage inventory, and there are multiple expenses that lower the profitability of that job, and thusly should also lower the commission that the sales rep is getting. Then we'll talk about based on a variable rate, and that would be per item. That's if different items get different rates, then there's a workaround for that, and I'll show you how that workaround works. Then we'll talk about based on a predetermined amount. That's if you calculate commission manually and you want to put it somewhere on the invoice and then pull it up in a report later on. I will show you how to do that. And then we'll talk about based on a predetermined amount within the transaction, and that's when we use specific items to track commission inside the actual invoice. So then we can run a report that just gives us that commission amount. So there's basically different approaches, right? They're very different approaches to calculating commission, and I wanted to dedicate an entire episode to this. And by the way, really important before we dig in, none of these will be automated. This requires some manual processes, some exporting into Excel, some manual calculations. I will show you all the techniques so then you can determine based on your needs to build a commission report, which may be the best approach to take. All of them will take some time, 5, 10, sometimes 30 minutes to build one report. And there are customers, I do have several customers that want to automate this process, that they want to just press one button and they want the commission report to automatically calculate. And the truth is that there's no way to do this. Like I actually have some custom reporting partners that I send those clients to, and they can do this. It is possible, but it is typically a pretty large investment, $2, $3, $4, $5,000 sometimes to build something like this, because you have to program special software to pull the data and construct it the way the customers want. However, the ones that can't afford to pay a couple $1,000s for a custom report, they can follow these techniques and do it on their own. Once you start finding yourself taking 2 to 3 hours to build a report, that there could be some value on getting a custom report program built just for you. Anyway, let's start with based on a sales amount. So the nice thing about a simple sales-based report is you can use the rep, which is the most common field used to track the salesperson's sales, or you can actually use ShipVia, which is kind of interesting, to track sales amount. And this only works in an invoice by invoice basis. In other words, if you have one rep for one customer and you create an invoice for the same customer with a different rep, it's going to show under that secondary rep's sales. So you have to make sure that every single invoice has the rep or the ShipVia, whatever mechanism you're going to use to track your sales reps. It has to be put on every invoice, and you have to be very careful that the user doesn't accidentally put the wrong rep in it. And the other issue is that even with QuickBooks Enterprise, you're not going to be able to restrict whether a user can or cannot change the rep for that. Now, there are some third-party apps in the App Store. One I think is called Easy Commission. Another one is called Q Commission or something like that. I haven't used them. I tried. It really didn't work for me, but I don't know if there was something I'm missing in the process. So it is possible that there may be some sort of app out there that can do it, but I haven't seen them work very much. Now, the other way to track sales commission based on a raw sales amount is by using the job type or customer type. But the salesperson has to be attached to the entire customer. So if the end users are a little bit lazy and they can't select a rep every single time, or you're afraid that they will select the wrong rep and kind of game the system, and you have a rep attached to a customer job, no matter what the invoice is, you could use job type or customer type to track that. So let's start doing some examples of that. Now, before we do that, let me run one more polling question just to kind of get an idea for where you guys are, which is, do you get requests to build sales commission reports? We have almost $500 people on the webinar live, so it would be interesting to get an idea for how many actually get requests for something like this. Okay, so this is the secondary. This is the second question, by the way. So we've had two questions so far. All right, we got about 30 seconds left. I'm gonna answer some preliminary questions we have in here. We haven't really gotten into the content yet. One of them is the somebody's asking the people that build reports for you. How do they build them? Well, we have apps like QCube that exports the data out of QuickBooks and puts it in a sort of its own separate database, and then they use something like Microsoft Access or Crystal Reports to build custom reports. Somebody else is asking, is there a way to split sales between four reps? So Kathy, the problem with that is you would have to have four places in QuickBooks to put reps, and you don't have that. So I would say the only way to possibly do that is using the very last technique I'll talk about, which is inserting the rep commission information inside the invoice itself, and it would be kind of a manual process. Someone says, I don't get the reports requests for commissions, but I do get report requests for custom reports that show sales by rep, even though they're not paying commissions. So the answer, Kathy, is this would be useful for that too. Let's see. Somebody else says, hey, I missed the first question. Is that okay? That's fine. We're going to have 4 questions in total. So you have to answer 3 out of the 4, and you should be okay with that. All right. So the polling question has been up for 2 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and close it. We have 92% of the votes. I will share the results real quick. So we only got about 42% that do get requests for that. 37 don't. And for the ones that don't, it could be because maybe your ear is not actively looking for that question. And then 23% say they don't work with businesses that have such a need. I hope that we don't lose you, that you do see some value on the webinar anyway. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into QuickBooks. And let's start with sales, just sales by rep based on the raw amount. So there's a couple of custom reports that you can build, and there's also some built-in reports. So on the reports, sales, there already is a sales by rep summary report. And I would say that may be the easiest way to get started. You can select the period, and you're going to have total sales amount by rep. Now, that means total sales amount, not profit. So if there's cost components, if there's any cost components in there, it's not going to work very well. So this is a sales by rep report. And basically, the way you would construct the commissions report from this would be to take this report, and let's say, for example, I'm going to do last month. So I'm going to go ahead and put last month here. Take this report and then go into Excel and then go to create new worksheet. And then from Excel, you guessed it, it'll be an extremely simple process to take, which will be simply just multiply the sales amount times a commission rate. I'll go ahead and construct it real quick and show you a couple of tips around putting that together, just because certain reps have different commission rates and stuff like that. So if you are working based on a flat commission rate and let's say, for example, the flat commission rate happened to be maybe, let's say, 5%, then you would simply just put in equals the dollar amount times 0.05, press enter, and then scroll down, and that's it. That would be your commission amount. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things about using this approach is that you can actually save this report and you can update over it. And that's one of the interesting ways of building the report and then writing over it. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Let me go ahead and save this report. I'm going to save it into the desktop somewhere. Okay. Let me put it in the desktop, and then we're going to call it COM report. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and remember this was a November report, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close that and pull the same report maybe for this month. Okay, which has entirely different numbers. And then I can go to Excel and go to update existing report, or update existing worksheet actually. Then I go find my worksheet. So I'm basically going to look for the report I already saved that had formulas in it. And then I select the sheet, and then I click export. Now, this doesn't always work. I have a feeling that, with my luck, that it won't, but normally it does. It normally does work pretty well. So let's see how this works. And in this particular capability, it's just not available in QuickBooks Online at all. The updating of the reports, which is one of the reasons I don't even bother trying to build custom reports in QuickBooks Online. It's actually one of the main intake questions I take when I work with any client, and it is up to me to recommend QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online. It's whether or not you're going to do commission reports. So notice I opened the report itself, and I didn't have to do anything with these formulas because it basically just updated the raw information for QuickBooks, and it automatically did that. So I don't have to do any copy and pasting, any rebuilding. So as long as I create the formulas outside of the report range, like this was a report range, as long as I did it on this part outside to the right of it or under it. So as long as I do the formulas on the side, you can always just update the reports and does that. So that's actually really, really, really nice. Now, yes, you can export any sales reports into Excel from QuickBooks Online, but this particular updating feature, I don't think they'll ever have it because it's the way QuickBooks and Excel interact with each other. Now, that's using sales by rep. Now, if for whatever reason your rep means something else, or you're using rep for some other circumstance, what you could do is you can actually use the ship via, and this is a workaround, and this is only when the rep means something else. And let's say, for example, rep, you're using it to track the customer service rep that deals with the client, but not necessarily the person that gets the commission, for example. So what you can do is you can use ship via. I'm going to go ahead and click on add new and show you. I'm going to put here Hector, and then I'm going to go to save and close, and then I'm going to pick another invoice at random, and I'm going to use the same ship via. And this is certainly a workaround, right? Because this is not what the software was designed to do. I'm going to put here John. So basically, I'm using the shipping method as a way to track commission, and then I would have to run a custom report. And the way you build a custom report like that is you go to reports, go to custom reports, you do a summary custom report, and then here where it says rows, we're going to have randomly shipping method here. And this is something that it's not intuitive. Like, no one would really think of this unless they're proactively trying to game QuickBooks to do something else. But you can do sales by shipping method. And I'm going to go and hit OK. And that would actually give you the numbers. See, we have Hector 6,000. We have John 10,000. Now, the custom report by default, when I go back into the filters, shows income and expense accounts, which means this would actually be a gross profit report. So this would contain this would contain costs as well. I can actually change that to just all ordinary income, and then that will show just sales, not sales minus costs. Now, I'm not saying that you should use this over reps. I'm not saying that, but I have clients that tell me, Hector, I got two people that got commissions. I got the primary person and then the secondary person. So this could be a way to use it where you're using rep for the primary and ship via for the secondary. Now, if you do need ship via, then nothing much you can do about it. So that's the one thing you can do. Now Keith is saying instead of using ship to, why not use a custom field? I would say, Keith, that makes sense to use a custom field. And what Keith is saying is, instead of, let me open up the invoice, he's saying invest, instead of using this one here, use some sort of blank custom field and type it in there. So I will tell you, Keith, the reason why a custom field doesn't work as well is, one, is the only QuickBooks Enterprise can really do drop downs for custom fields. So if you're working with Pro or Premier, you won't get a drop down on a custom field. And two, you cannot use a custom field in a custom report like this. So you couldn't create a custom report with custom field data. You would have to pivot that in Excel. So wonder if that makes sense, but that's kind of the situation. So even though I can run a filter by a custom field, I can't run a summary like this with rows and columns by a custom field. So that's just a really important point, and Keith, I hope that answered your question. Now we have, you can use job type or customer type, but the salesperson needs to be attached to the entire customer job. So let me tell you how that works. Let's say, for example, that there isn't a sales rep per se, but maybe there's an account manager that manages the relationship, and they also get some sort of bonus and commission. And we don't want to sit there and add that person's name onto every invoice, whether it's going to be a rep, or like in this case, we have space for rep and we have space for ship via. Let's say that for whatever reason, we're using rep and ship via for something else. The other alternative to attach a rep to a sale is by using customer type. So let me show you that. I'm going to go into customers, customer center, and then I'm going to pick one of these customers, whichever. So I'll pick this one, and I'm going to go ahead and double click on this customer, and then go to additional info, and then where it says customer type, if I'm not using that for anything else, I can put here a rep's name. So I basically use customer type, in lieu of customer type, to put a rep's name, but every single invoice attached to that customer will be attached to that customer type, so you can't change this transaction by transaction. But what's nice about it, I'm going to go ahead and pick another one here and do the same thing, and I'll pick a different rep. We'll put here Stephen Miller. Okay, so we'll create that. So I'm using customer type in this case instead. But what's nice about it is I can also build a report, a custom report by customer type. So I can go to custom reports, and I can click on summary, and then I can leave total up here, and then rows by, I can put customer type. And again, I can't change it invoice by invoice. It will be globally for all the invoices, but that would be what rep would be for, or what Shibia could be for. And then here I'm just going to put all just in case, and then hit OK. So then we get the sales here, and then they get tracked based on the rep. Okay, so that's basically another workaround you can have. But again, it would be a rep that would be attached to the entire every single transaction having to do with that vendor. Now, one of the things that's nice about customer type is that it will also track with it all the expenses that have been job costed to that job. So if there, I'm just going to double click on this one and show you. So if there's any, for example, you see this check here, if you have this check attached to a customer, right? So we have any sort of job costing, check, bill, credit card that gets attached to a customer, you actually get that cost as part of the customer type, because the customer type grabs the customer's name and any things that were job costed to it to display that number. I mean, unless I go to a customized report in the top left, go to filters and change that from all income expense to all income, I could actually even get the expenses that come with it, which means that if you pay commissions based on a gross profit or net profit, that could work. Okay. Now someone else says, to split into multiple reps, why not create a rep called split and then do the split manually in Excel? That works, Kimberly. I don't think that's the issue. The problem is that, again, we're trying to reduce the amount of manual work that we do. Somebody says, does this work with QuickBooks Online? The answer is no. QuickBooks Online does not do custom summary reports. Also, QuickBooks Online does not do customer type, at least yet. I mean, there was some, I think I heard through the grapevine that they may be working on adding customer type as a dimension, but there's no custom summary report. Now, you could do this with custom fields and a detailed report, but not in a custom summary format. Okay, so that would be the first one, which is based on sales. Now let's talk about based on gross profit. Now the only way to get gross profit on sales information, it would have to be with inventory parts, especially if you're going to use the rep, right? So you have to have inventory parts. Non-inventory parts won't work unless we use customer type, as I mentioned earlier, or classes. So in the event that you're working with non-inventory parts and you want to do gross profit based on the profit of a job, then you would have to use customer type or classes and track the classes on the expense side as well. And you would have to use the rep in lieu of the customer type or the rep in lieu of the classes. So if you're using classes for something else, may not be able to achieve it. Rep can only be attached to a sale. So you can't really attach rep to expenses. And in the cases that you can, it doesn't really work well on reports. So just remember that if you are going to use um, a rep in an invoice, you want to track profitability, it must be an inventory part. So let's talk about that real quick. So let's come into QuickBooks here, and let me go ahead and pull an invoice. I'm just going to pull an invoice here, and I hope that I can pull one that has an inventory sale. Let's grab this one. I believe these are inventory parts. Yes, they are. Okay, perfect. So as you can see here, the sale is 7,786. Nowhere on this invoice it's the profit of the job displayed. However, inside of this invoice, there's a journal entry that does contain the cost information. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to click on Control Y, and Control Y is the shortcut to run a sort of transaction detail report just on this transaction itself. And you're going to see that we got debits and we have credits. Now, in order to simplify this whole thing, I'm going to go ahead and just collapse some of these items. That way we're just looking at the item name, the account, and the debit and the credit. Okay, so this gives me an idea pretty much of what's going on. All the debits are my expenditures, all the credits are my sales. However, there's one debit here that I don't need, which is the accounts receivable amount. And there's another one that we don't need, which is the inventory asset amount. So we can run a filter that only shows my revenue and my cost of goods sold. So only revenue, only cost of goods sold. Again, I need to run a report that shows me that and that. That way I'll know what my profit is. I can do the filter straight from here. So I'll click on Customize Report, and I'll click on Filter. And then where it says Account, I'm going to hit the drop down and select one that we haven't talked about yet, which is called All Ordinary Income / Cost of Goods Sold. So that's a special filter that only shows income and cost of goods sold, which is perfect for inventory parts. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then we're actually going to have a running balance here. So we're going to see our credit, 7,786. That's my sale. And then we have 3,057 is my cost of goods sold. So if I enable a column, I'm going to go to Customize Report, and then I'm going to enable one called Balance. So as long as I enable this one here called Balance, and I hit OK, it will track my profitability. So that number you see at the bottom there, it's my profitability on that specific invoice. Now, why that's important? Because in order to have sanity check around any of the commission reports you make, especially if they're based on profit, you want to be able to confirm more or less that these profit amounts are making sense, especially if they are the correct margin, right? So you may want to maybe export this to Excel and divide the dollar amount by the sales amount to make sure the margins are on track. So that's a really, really important piece. But I don't expect you to do commission reports on an invoice by invoice basis, but if you want to do it, you can, and that this is the way you would do it. So with that in mind, let me then run a commission report based on gross profit, which will basically be, to be honest with you, you go to reports, you go to sales, and then you go sales by rep summary. So you can use the default report, but then go to customize report, go to filters, and then instead of having all accounts, you can do income minus cost of goods sold. I hope this works. If it doesn't work, I'll show you how to build it in a summary way, but I'm pretty sure that will work. Today's there it is. So that would actually show you income and costs. Okay, income and cost. So let me just do today, for example. Let's just do one day, and then we'll pull up one invoice here, and let's take a look at it. 7,900. That in itself was, I believe, these are non-inventory parts. A good example. See, these are non-inventory parts, so there's no cost associated with these. Let me take a look at this one. Okay, so this one does have inventory. Okay, so this one, so I wanted to show you that what I just tried to do, which is run the sales by rep summary and change the filter, that didn't work. So scratch that. Scratch that. So the way you do a gross profit report, I was just trying to see if you guys were paying attention. So the way you do a gross profit report by sales rep, you would actually have to build a custom report. So we go to reports, we go to custom reports, then we go to summary. Then we're going to go to total. We can leave that in total. Rows by, in this case, I'm going to go down and put rep. And then where it says filters, at this point, I'm going to select all income and expense accounts or all income and cost of goods sold. This one makes more sense. All income and cost of goods sold, and hit OK. And that will give me a profitability. This is actually a true profitability report. Let me switch this to today to make sure that we have a different number. Yeah, there we go. So that is a true profitability report. So the invoice that we're looking at here, there's several of them. Let me just pull up one here. So we got the invoices that we're looking at here, like this one, that's 9,000. The profit is actually 5,000. So that actually pretty much shows you that it doesn't show the sales amount, it shows the gross profit amount. Okay, let me run a polling question here so I can take a quick break and let me answer some of the questions. Okay, someone says account selection for the custom report, beautiful. Okay, that was just a comment. Somebody says, how would you perform this based activity based on a billable hour? So Robert, I'm assuming that you want to insert billable hours inside of an invoice, and then you want to calculate the cost based on that billable hour. If I get that correctly, then that would be the very last example that I will do, which will be based on a custom piece of information that we put inside of the invoice. So hopefully we'll have time to cover that, Robert. You can't do it any other way. You have to build it into the invoice itself. Somebody else says most of my contractors do not use inventory items, but do pay commissions based on job profit. So Evie, I would say if you are going to pay commission based on job profits, you may have to run a job profit report and then keep a log somewhere else of who the rep is, so then you can run the net income by rep. Or maybe if you're not using customer type, Evie, I think customer type may be a good idea, because that will track the entire job's profitability and give you the profit then. Can you use more than one rep? So the answer is no. You can only select one rep, but as I showed you earlier, you could use Ship Via as a secondary rep if you don't need to use Ship Via. Somebody says that you're going to cover cash versus accrual. If I have time, yes, but right now we're all these examples are based on accrual. There are some nuances on cash accrual with partial payments. I'm not sure if I can get there, but we'll see. So based on this exact theme, let me just go back and show you how to run an invoice profitability report in Excel. So this would be something that would tell me invoice by invoice what my profit on the job is. Now, I cannot get anywhere close to this because QuickBooks can only show me an invoice by invoice in detail. It cannot show me in the context of profit. So I have to use a detailed report and then pivot it in Excel. So let me show you how that works. So first, let me go to reports. I'm going to go to accountant and taxes, and then I'm going to go to where is transaction list by date. That's kind of like how I start building a lot of custom reports. So I go to reports, accounting and taxes, transaction list by date. And the reason why I like this one is because it doesn't show a total at the bottom. Okay. The other thing I do is I go to customize report and I go to filters and I tell it that I only want to see invoices. So I'm going to go to transaction type and then I'm going to go to all and then I'm going to select invoice. That way I'm only seeing invoices. And then I'm going to look for the detail level custom field. Sorry, not a custom field, the detail level filter. I'm going to select all except summary. Now, if you're completely befuddled about why I'm doing this, I recommend you watch the video we had a couple weeks ago because that's really where I spend most of the time discussing this specific filter, which is probably one of the most important ones out of this whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to have all my invoices with my debit and credit information. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to customize reports. And then where it says columns, I'm going to enable account type. There's a particular reason why I do that. It's because there could be so many accounts for income and so many accounts for cost of goods sold that by using account type, I only see whether it's income or cost of goods sold, and that actually helps me focus my vision on what I want to get. Now let me go ahead and disable all the columns that I don't need. Okay, so I'm gonna leave the customer name. I'm gonna leave the date. I don't need transaction type. So this is really all I need. Customer name, debit, credit, and account type. That's really all I need. Now I could also pre-filter here, go to custom reports, click on filter, and on accounts do the same thing. Select all income and cost of goods sold filter. That way I'm not seeing whatever affects my asset. And there it is. There's all my credits, all my debits for all of my invoices. And I'll select, let's say, for example, this fiscal year. So I'm going to have plenty of invoices here on this report. Now, I usually memorize this report and I'll call it all invoices for pivot, whatever it is. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and export it to Excel. And I'm going to show you a real practical application on why we would use a pivot table, exactly why we use a pivot table. Okay. So let me go ahead and click on export. Okay. And somebody says, why not include credit memos? So Donna, I'm actually not against that. So for the sake of the example, I just did invoices. But if you did want to include all returns and stuff like that, then the answer is yes, you should also include credit memos. So Donna, thank you for that comment. That was actually really, really good. So again, I only did invoices for now, but of course, if you want to include returns, do that. But for now, I'm just trying to run a profitability by invoice report. Okay, so here we go. So we have our pivot table, we have our data ready to pivot. We have transaction date, invoice number, customer's name, account type, debit and credit. Okay, we could also add, actually I made a mistake. I think I should have done one more thing. Let me go back and go to customize report. I'm also going to include amount. And there's a reason for that. It's just so I don't have to go into Excel and add that extra column there. So I'm going to add amount. That way I can do those sum calculations to give me profit. So let me memorize this again. So I apologize for that. And then let me go ahead and go to Excel, create new worksheet. Now the reason why I go this route of memorizing the report is because maybe after I do my pivot table next month, I want to run the same report and then update my Excel spreadsheet. That way I don't have to create the pivot table again. That's one of the values of memorizing the report and using the exact same formatting each time. Okay, we'll give that some time to export. Somebody says, can you add me to the list of people interested in getting copies of the slides? So Suzanne, if you get the emails after every episode that shows you the link to the recording, you will get the slides. I'll go ahead and do that. Somebody says, do you have a YouTube on this? So yes, I have a video just about pivot tables, not with this exact same example, but just about pivot tables. So okay, now that we have the data, I'm going to go ahead and delete some of this extra data that I don't need because I actually need a flat table. So I'm getting rid of all the extra columns there. And I want to make sure that all my data is complete here and that I can see everything that I'm supposed to be looking at. Date, invoice number, customer name, income, cost of goods sold, debit, credit, and amount. So basically I come in here, as long as I have my icon anywhere in the table, and I click on insert, and I click on pivot table, and I hit OK. This is all going to be done within Excel. I'm going to go and find my invoice number, which is this little box here that says num, N-U-M, okay? And yes, I'm numb from talking so much. So there's my invoice number. And then I'm going to come in here and then grab name. And name would be, it looks like a secondary there. And then I'm going to go down here and click on amount. Okay, so basically that's going to give me what's called the summed up amount. That would be my profit per invoice. Now, this table doesn't look very nice. So I'm going to click on design, okay, up here on the top. I'm going to click on design, and then I'm going to remove all the subtotals. I won't do subtotal, won't do grand totals, and then I'm going to do a tabular format. And then this is really, really neat because now we get an invoice number, we get the name of the customer, and then we get the profit. Now, the reason why I enabled account type, I'll show you, because if I grab account type and put it here under filters, I can actually come in here and say, you know what, let me just see my sales. So I'll just select my income filter, and then I'm only going to see the sales portion. So what you're seeing here is my sales portion. Or I want to see just the cost of goods sold. I select cost of goods sold, and then I only see the cost portion, or I can do all, and that would give me profit. So this is what I call a profit by invoice report. Now, if you wanted to take it one step further, I'm not going to do it for this example, is you would actually enable the item itself. So you would enable the item in your report, just the item, and then hit OK, and then there's my item. So after you export it, you can also pivot that item. So if you wanted to drill down and actually see your profit by item, you could also, by invoice and then by item, you can also go that route. Okay, so that was kind of talking about the profitability by invoice concept and why you can only track gross profit when you're using inventory items. So let's talk about based on a net job profit. So very common for like construction companies that are going to pay a commission based on the net profit of a job. Okay. Oh, somebody else was asking, can you add a rep? So Carol's saying, let me go back for a second. Carol's asking me about this. Says, could you add a rep to this? Yeah, absolutely. So if I were to add a rep to this, so for example, if I were to go to customize report and then click on rep and then hit OK. So yeah, that was low-hanging fruit. I should have mentioned that. So if I do export it with the rep, then when I'm in Excel, I can add rep to maybe up here to the customer type, or I can add it to my pivot to group them by rep. So the answer is yes, absolutely. I mean, pivot tables could take 3 to 4 hours to learn. So I'm just doing 50 minutes worth to make sure I don't get too much off track. But Carol, you can absolutely do that. And that would actually make sense because you're building a commission report. Okay. All right. Same thing with classes or ship via or any additional information that you track, you can use in that type of report. Now, if I'm going to track profitability by job in order to use rep, some of the options that you have is to use rep as to use class as your rep. So, for example, if I were to select a class up here and then let me put here Mary Jones. Okay, so I'm putting my class up here. Now, one thing to know is even though I can assign a class for a rep, if I have my classes enabled inside of the columns, so in other words, if I had in my template, if I had gone to custom data layout and I had enabled here are my columns, if I had enabled classes, then you have to be very, very careful because just because you have a class up here doesn't mean that the individual items are going to be hitting that class. You actually would need to have that class on every single line item if you were to use classes for reps. Now, some of the advantages of using classes for rep is that you can have one invoice, one sale that you could essentially pay 2 different reps on, assuming that one rep sold half the job and the other rep sold the other half. And there's some other interesting workarounds that we can do with classes, which I'll cover if I have time. I may not have, but we'll see. So let me go ahead and hit save and close. Okay. And then I'm going to run reports, company financial, profit and loss by class real quick. And then we see that Mary Jones has a net income of 653, and then whatever percentage they're supposed to get on that, you can use that. So I would say that's very much low-hanging fruit when it comes to doing a sales commission report based on profit and using a class as a way to track that. Now, a summarized version of that would be reports, custom reports, summary, and then we would pick under columns, we can do total. Under rows, we can use class, again, because we're using the class to measure profit. And then under filters, we have to make sure that it does say all income and expense accounts. And then we hit OK. And then we're going to be able to see, let me do all here. We're going to be able to see Mary Jones profitability, and then we can use Excel to multiply the percent or whatever that is. So that's kind of the reason why class would be really powerful for net profit by job, or customer type if you're using class for something else. So those are going to be the two most important ones. Okay. Next topic here is based on a variable rate per item or transaction. Okay. So this one is probably one of the most interesting ones out there because it would really be tricking QuickBooks into thinking they're supposed to be it's really meant to do something else. So for example, if I'm going to use my ship via workaround, and let me just pull up an invoice here. So if I want to use my ship via workaround, that could work. I could actually use my ship via to track a commission rate. So for example, if I go to add new and then I put here 0.25, basically what I'm telling myself that this invoice, the entire invoice, we're going to pay 0.25 of commission. And I'll show you in a practical way how that shows up later on. Let me go here to back, hit yes. And then on the ship via, I'll put here 0.25, and then I'll hit back, yes. And then on this one, under ship via, I'll put 0.15. So let's say this one pays 15%. And you have to use that format, point something, because we're going to do mathematical calculations on that. Let me go ahead and hit save and close, and then show you how this will work. So the way this could work is I go to reports, then I go into custom reports, I do a summary, and get ready for some magic. Display columns by, and I'll use rep, just because I'm going to track it by rep. And then I'm going to use shipping method in here. And let's say, for example, I'm going to do it based on sales amount, not profit. Okay, so I'll do all ordinary income accounts, and then the columns are rep and the rows are shipping method. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And what's really cool about this is that then later on, what I could do, and I'm going to assume for a second, let me just do all. I'm going to assume for a second that this is the totality of my invoices. So I'm going to run a filter here under shipping method and only show you, well, in this case, I can't. So I'll clean it in Excel. Let me go ahead and go to Excel, go to create new worksheet. And I'll clean the other ones that have other things in shipping method. That way we're only looking at the data that we want to calculate. So let's say, for example, that we were using shipping method in its entirely for this, and then calculating commission becomes super simple, because basically what I do is I'll come in here and do this times the rate plus the next one times the rate. I want to make sure that that's blatantly obvious to everyone what is it that I'm doing, right? I'm calculating the sales amount times the rate, and I use ship via to trick the rate. And then I come here and I just use the magic of Excel, and this will pretty much automate. I got to make sure that these formulas are correct. So I should have, let me see, supposed to put $sign here and $sign here. That's just part of the Excel formulation. I can click and drag that to the right, and that could work. There you go. So this will tell me exactly what the commission rates were I'm supposed to calculate. And again, I could use a pivot table maybe with some detailed reports, but this is the point that we can actually use things that QuickBooks is not meant to use, which is ship via or something like that, to track it, and then we can again, it's not automation, but it is pretty close to it. All right. Under the same theme, let's talk about individual rates. Individual rates based on items. So let's say, for example, that some items get 10%, some items get 20%, just to give you an example. And this is where QuickBooks Enterprise works quite nicely. So let me show you a QuickBooks Enterprise feature that helps a lot. So let me go to Edit, Preferences, and then I'm going to go into Accounting, Company Preferences, and then click on Assign Classes to. I'm going to select Items, and this will help speed up the process on using individual commission rates per item if you're not using classes for this purpose. So for example, let's say custom work. Let me just go edit custom work real quick. Let's say custom work is supposed to get a commission rate of 25%. So I'm going to create a class here called 0.25, same workaround as I did before. And let's say, let me grab a different item here. Let's say that this vanity gets then a commission rate of 0.075. So let's say this one gets 7.5%, just to say an example. And then I hit OK. So then when I go create an invoice from scratch, I'll pick a customer, right? I'll pick my rep as normal, right? Using reps. Then I'll pick my item, custom work. Notice that my class automatically comes up as 0.25. Then I'll put here whatever. Right? Let me put here 10,000. And let's say I'm also going to sell a part. And that comes in as my class 0.075. Again, it is a huge workaround, but it is one interesting way that we can do it. And then let's say, for example, I got my invoice here, right, which is 12,300, and then I can run a detail report. Okay, it would have to run a detail report. So let me run reports, custom reports, transaction detail, and then let's say, for example, we'll do, I think that was today's date, and I have to make sure that I'm showing my class. Okay, there we go. So I'm showing my class, and I should also show my rep. And you're gonna see some real magical stuff happen here. So I got my class, I got my rep, and I can go a couple ways because I'm doing it by item. So one of the ways I can do is use the same concept in the summary side, which is do a rep in the top, and then a class as a row, right? And then do the same calculation, which is multiplying it by the classes. Well, what's nice about this is in an invoice by invoice level, like for example, you see in this particular invoice, we have the same the same rep getting two different rates. Okay, so that's actually what's really nice about it, is you can have two reps getting two different rates. And if I open this, notice that this is based on profit. So this would actually see the sale was 2,300, but the profit is 450. So this actually is multiplying. It's going to have your net profit, and then you can use Excel to multiply it times that. And you could also use custom fields with this. The only problem is automating custom fields is not as great as with classes. Okay, but custom fields could work really well for this. But yeah, I find classes to be a little bit more powerful. So again, somebody says, I would prefer to use custom fields, and the answer is yes, Allison. The problem is that you can't do that pivot the way, not the pivot, but that custom summary report with the rows and columns. You can't do it with custom fields. So you would have to run a detailed report. Right? That's the only challenge. The other issue with the nice thing about using classes is you can you can use the batch reclassify feature and add classes if the user forgets to add classes, and you can, as I mentioned, you can automate it with QuickBooks Enterprise quite a bit. Why hasn't Intuit provided a gross profit report? So Karen, there is I mean, there's ways for you to build it, and it's actually quite easy. But I don't know why a gross profit report by itself would be useful, but there are some job profitability reports and stuff like that. I don't want to focus too much on that because I'm trying to focus on like this whole rep and commission rate aspect, Karen. But yes, I think there is in one way or the other some sort of commission report that I mean gross profit report that you can build with QuickBooks. So I am going to show you one last thing, which is I said it may have been the bonus example, which is using a predetermined amount inside of the invoice to track commission. Now, this is going to be sort of the peak of custom reports because there's some interesting workarounds happening with this technique, but this technique actually works pretty nicely. Okay, so okay, let's go into QuickBooks and let's pull an invoice. So let's say that I want to track my commissions inside of my transaction in QuickBooks because that would actually help me. I would say this is the easiest way to automate it is by building it in here. But the problem is the way we build it, it would have to be a very specific way. So I'm going to show you how I would do it. So the first thing is, let me just create an invoice, pick a customer here at random, pick a couple of items. Okay, hopefully an item that I have in stock. Okay, that would help to have the item in stock. Okay, so let's say 100 and let's say 50. Okay, so I got 9,900. So one of the things I can do is I can create a new item, which will be a group item. And I'm just going to call it sales tracker. I'm going to use some sort of really generic name, something that the customer may see if I'm enabling invoices, but I'm not going to click print items in group because this whole calculation would be highly internal. I'm going to create a new item. We'll go to new, and I'm going to create a other charge, and I'm going to call this commissions. So I'll create the first one called commissions, and then I'll hit some sort of commission account, whatever account you want to use, and then hit OK. And then I'll create a subcategory for every rep. So let me call this commissions Hector. Okay, and I'll use the same account that I'm using here. So I got a commission report, commissions Hector, and then maybe I'll do one for Mary as well. So you have to create a commissions item for every single rep. And the reason for that is because then when we're not using reps anymore, or we want to track maybe multiple reps on a job, and this is actually one of the great workarounds. You actually technically don't have to, and you could essentially use the rep. But assuming that we're also going to solve for having multiple reps in there. Just delete this again. Let me go back because I forgot one more thing. Let me go into my sales tracker. Okay, there's my sales tracker. So basically what we do is we have all of our reps here, and then you would use whichever one you need. And then I would have another item which is meant to reverse the amount. Okay, so let's call it commissions, and we'll call this one reversal, for example. Okay, so I got my commissions reversal, and I should be hitting the same exact account. Okay, whichever one it was, I recommend you use the same one throughout. Hit OK. And then on the commissions reversal, forgot to do something. This one, you're going to make it, hold on, let me save this. There's my reversal. Okay, so this one, I'm going to make it negative 100%. Okay, and that has a very specific purpose, so we'll discuss that a little bit later on. And then I'm going to hit OK. And then my other commission one, I'm actually going to, let's say, for example, my Hector commission, I'm going to put as my rate, I'm going to put the actual commission rate that Hector gets. So let's say, for example, Hector gets, just to say a number, 25%. So I'm going to put there 0.25. I'm not going to put a percentage. I'm just going to put 0.25 because I'm going to percentage won't work, by the way. So I have to use 0.25. And let's say that Mary gets 20%. So I'll put 0.20. Kind of bear with me on this one. I know it's a lot of moving parts, but this is going to be kind of advanced, and there will be a video on it, of course, because this is being recorded. But it's something that you may have to practice step by step. Okay. So go back into my sales tracker. I'll put it in here. Okay. And let's say, for example, that the only salesperson involved here is going to be Hector. So I can delete Mary from this line. And then what I can do is I can grab my entire sales amount, which in this case is 9,900, and I can plug this into my quantity. Okay, so not to my amount, to my quantity, because my rate is essentially driving my quantity, right? My rate is essentially driving that commission rate. So again, I'm trying to semi-automate this. So I'm manually putting 9,900 in the quantity, which is just me copying the total dollar amount. So the minute I do that, QuickBooks, this item, commission Hector, will now calculate with the price, the total, and calculate my commission. And also because I got the reversal in there, that's automatically going to reverse with negative 100%. So at the end of the day, it's not going to add or remove anything from the invoice. But let me show you what's really neat about this. What's really cool about this is when I go print the invoice, okay, you get this thing called sales tracker, but nothing else happens. Most customers don't get confused by that. If you think they're going to get confused, put a dot, put a letter, put a zero, put a hyphen. It doesn't matter what you call that item. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, I had a customer that was so mad that I did that for them that ended up replacing the item name with a hyphen like this, and it ended up just being a hyphen. So when the invoice was printed, let me show you, it really wasn't confusing anyone. That's just a hyphen. It doesn't do anything. So what you call it doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. Okay. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because I am simply just tracking the commission I'm going to pay. Some people say, well, I think what the negative should be an accounts payable. The negative should be a liability because you have to pay your vendors. And let's say that that's the case, and that's fine. I don't have to reverse it to the same expense account, right? And I would say I will reverse it to the same expense account if I'm managing payroll some other way and I'm including it in payroll, and I don't want to go to the trouble of separating in my payroll my commission and my sales. This is just to know to track it. Then I'm going to go to reports. Actually, I'm going to create one more invoice. So I'm going to do Mary's commission now. So let me grab another sale, completely different. Okay. And then I'll add my tracker. I will delete Hector from here because this one's going to be Mary now. Okay. And then I'll type in 3,800 on the quantity, let the 20% calculate, and then the reversal. Perfect. So I'm going to hit save and close. Now, the reason why I'm reversing it is so my P&L is not affected. But then when I run a report, I go to reports, custom report, summary report, where it says rows. I'm going to select at this point now item detail. Then I'm going to go to filters, go to my item filter, and then come in here and select multiple items. And then I'll go down to my commission items, and I'll just select all of my reps, right? Assuming that's the route I'm going to go with reps, or that could also be rates, whichever way you want to go. Hit OK, and then hit OK, and there's my commission report, fully automated. Again, assuming that putting the information inside the invoice is something that you seem like it's too much work. Okay. So the reason why I do this is because maybe I just want to use it for tracking mechanisms and not anything else. And the commission will not be booked on the job itself because it will be pretty much reversed. Now, if you want to also use the same technique and use the reversal as a way to track your accounts payable, because you're actually going to use the same account to do that, then that's actually kind of a simple topic. Let me go back into my item list and look for my reversal. There's my reversal. And I'm gonna change the name from reversal to payable, and I'm gonna put this under commissions payable and put that as a liability somewhere and hit save and close and then hit OK. Okay, and then that will show up in my balance sheet automatically. There should be a commissions payable account right here. So that's here on my balance sheet. I may have to reverse the polarity of this, by the way. I may have the negative in the wrong place and the positive on the wrong place. So that's something I would just have to fix on the item itself because I'm dealing with a payable. So I would have to then reverse it, right? So it would look the other way in this case. So this would be negative and that would be reversed like that. So I just that's a really important point, right? That actually it's important that we took it to the payables line, so we see that there was a problem in that process. So that should have been a negative amount, so you can track the commission as a negative and the payable as a positive. Same effect at the end, but then it shows up here in my payables. And at this point, then they will be job costed. And just make sure that when you actually do pay it, that you actually use the same commissions payable account. Okay, so I went a little bit extra. So if you answer all your polling questions already, you will get your CPE certificate. You didn't have to stay for the extra part, but I just wanted to show you something a little bit extra. Anyway, we will be on a every 2 week cycle until about September. Then we start getting our September tax season and our October tax season and QB Connect and Thanksgiving. Then the calendar is going to get a little bit out of whack. But at least for the next month and a half or so, the next 2 months, we will be every other week. So the next one will be July 13 and then so forth. Now, there is going to be one or two ACE approved webinars, but we're still waiting a word from Intuit, and we'll put it on the website once it's ready, and we'll also remind you on the Facebook group as well. Okay, that's it. So I want to thank again our sponsors: TSheets, #1 rated app in the App Store. Create, manage, and approve timesheets from any device. TSheets.com. Arrowworkflow.com. Only workflow solution created by pro advisors for pro advisors, and HubDoc, #1 document aggregation tool to quickly gather documents from your clients, bank statements, check images, etc., etc. Thank you again for being part of QB Power Hour. Join our Facebook group. Just search QB Power Hour on Facebook. Continue the conversation. Ask your questions there. There's plenty of people willing to help, including myself and Michelle. And that's it. You guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.